All right. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to be doing a 1 hour PBIS foundations training. So we're really just going to cover how to use PBIS in a school. We're not going to go into the PBIS reward system. We're really just going to stick to understanding the framework of PBIS and supporting your school and implementing PBIS in your daily practices. Now, before I get started, I want to take just a moment. Laurie knows who I am. We've emailed back and forth, but for everyone else, my name is Adam Eford. I am the lead professional development coach here with Navigate 360. I have been a part of this company for 4 years now. Prior to that, I worked as an educator in the state of North Carolina. I did that for about 12 years. I started as a music teacher at an elementary school. I moved into a reading classroom, counseling, and then administration before joining PBIS Reward several years ago as a PD coach. So again, as I go through today's training, I want you to feel comfortable to ask me any questions. It doesn't have to be Laurie. It could be anyone on the call. If you have a question, feel free to ask that. I'm happy to assist in any way I can. For our session today, it would be extremely helpful if you would have a piece of paper and it's something to write with. It doesn't have to be a pen, but whatever you have will be fine. And also, if you have your cameras on, there will be a portion where I would need cameras. I'm going to be able to see you. So right now it's okay, but if you can turn your camera on, that would be very helpful. That all being said, folks, let's jump right in and get started. So we wouldn't be PBIS if we didn't begin with basic expectations. Much like we would encourage you to go over that with your students each day, we like to start our trainings modeling that. So as far as being respectful today, keep your microphone muted. I welcome you to unmute and ask questions if you have those. I will tell you, I can see it looks like some of you might be in very close proximity of each other. So just be careful about that. Sometimes Zoom gives you a lot of feedback when two of you are in one space together. Other than that, feel comfortable to unmute and ask questions or engage if you would like. Be open to new ideas. I want to discuss some ways that PBIS can be implemented in your school. Please know that everything I'm saying to you today are suggestions and general framework. What you do at your school level can be very different, so it's just entirely up to you. And as far as being safe, folks, I can't stress this enough. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, and feel free to share any relevant information or ideas you may have in the chat. Anything you put in the chat will also be saved with the recording, so you can always look back on that later, okay? Also, thank you for those of you that have your camera on. As I said before, that'll be extremely helpful in a few moments, so I appreciate those of you that have that on for me. This is a quick rundown of our agenda for today. We're going to start by looking at PBIS foundations, really understanding the what, why, and how of PBIS. We're then going to move into behavioral instruction, a good bit of an understanding of that school-wide matrix that is used for PBIS, and classroom routines. We're going to spend some time discussing behavior-specific praise and how to address negative behaviors. Most people, when they hear PBIS, they just think of all the positive things, right? And glitter and rainbows and unicorns, right? But I want you to know we also are aware that there are going to be negative behaviors that we need to address and deal with. So we will take a few moments discussing ways that you could deal with those behaviors in a positive way. And then, of course, we're going to make sure to take a little bit of time to talk about student incentives, right? Anytime we're using an incentive system, whether that's PBIS rewards or Starbucks or McDonald's or wherever you might go, those rewards that if you're going to earn points, you want to be able to do something with those points, right? So we want to make sure to take some time to talk about incentives that you could provide for students that they could use with points that they earn through PBIS. And then we'll wrap up with some questions and some additional information. So let's get right into the foundations. The first thing I want to discuss with you is really what PBIS is, right? Stands for positive behavioral interventions and supports. Most people remember those first two words rather easily, but a lot of times we forget the interventions and supports. So realize that with PBIS, we want to remember we're doing a lot of things proactively with tier one, and that we're establishing expectations and teaching those in our school, but we also want to make sure we're paying attention to our discipline data and providing interventions and supports for students who might need assistance outside of that tier one structure and what we use for every student in the school. So with PBIS, we do encourage positive behaviors by giving students points, but it's important not only to give them those points, but to acknowledge them with behavior specific praise. For example, I don't want to just give Laurie a point and not tell her why she received that, right? It's her knowing why she received that point is what's going to make that behavior continue. If I just make it rain points in my classroom, no one knows where those points are coming from. So we want to make sure we do include some behavior specific praise there, and we'll discuss that today as well. You also want to make sure that you teach appropriate behaviors. Folks, we're going to look at some examples here in a few moments, but it is important that we teach our expectations. What I view as respectful and what Lori views as respectful might be very different. So it's important that as people, as teachers, we explain to our students what we're looking for each day. And then again, you promote those by giving them those points and that behavior specific praise that I mentioned before. Now, I'm sure we've all seen this tiered system, right? This MTSS framework or RTI framework, whatever your state might use. Again, we use this for behavior, much like we do in the academic world. So I'm going to give you guys an example just to help conceptualize this for us. Are Takis popular where you guys are at? Do kids eat Takis a lot? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of head shake. I see some of y'all that are shaking your head in disgust. I am also a part of that crew. But let's pretend for a moment that I gave everyone a bag of Takis and I asked you to eat that bag of Takis. If you don't know, Takis are spicy potato chips, and folks, they really are spicy. But if I gave you those, and then after I gave you that, I gave you a small cup of water. Raise your hand if you feel like, Adam, I might need a whole bottle of water. That small cup isn't going to do it for me. Thank you, Justine. Thank you, Rick. I thank you, Kate. Thank you, Corey. Good. A few of us. Okay, Mr. Fox. I see several of us are like, look, I need a bottle of water, right? Some of you seem fine with the small cup, right? Well, some of you might be like me. The older I get, the less I can eat spicy foods. You'll learn as you get older, some things just change, right? And that's something that changed for me. So if I eat something spicy, I'm going to need a glass of milk, a bottle of Tums, 30 minutes away from humans. That's really more for you than for me, but we're just going to leave that right there, folks. We won't go into details. I wanted to use this example because that's what we do with behavior. In tier one, we're establishing what we think is going to be enough for everyone. In my example, that was that small cup of water. In tier two, we don't change what we're doing really. We just provide more of that, right? Additional layers. Notice I didn't change what I provided in tier two. I just offered you more water, right? So again, that's what tier two is all about, providing an additional layer of support. Tier three, that is where we're changing things, right? That's where we're individualizing for a specific student to meet their needs. In my example, that was that glass of milk and those Tums in 30 minutes, right? Again, I want to point out, majority of your students should be in that tier one structure, roughly 80%, maybe 10 to 15% in tier two, and less than 5% in tier three. If you're seeing higher percentages of that in tier two and tier three, that usually means we need to revisit tier one and rediscover or redefine some things to make it more clear for our staff and students. Now, what is the impact PBIS is going to have on your school and your students and staff? So for your students, we're going to see increased academic achievement and more opportunities to really acknowledge students. Have any of you ever called home to speak with a family member and you get on the phone with them and the first thing they say is, "What did my child do?" Right? Okay, thank you. I see several hands going up. Folks, that happens because there's a stigma attached to the phone number from school, right? And some of that's our fault as educators. Some of that's the state's fault because they don't give us time to make those phone calls and things that we probably would like to do. But nonetheless, the reality is this is a great way for you to demonstrate that we are acknowledging students with positive behavioral praise. And so it does increase those opportunities to acknowledge and, of course, again, seeing those decreased absences in your school. For your staff, you're going to see improvements in your relationship. Folks, let me ask you a question. If you were to cut the grass of your neighbor, raise your hand if you would at least expect your neighbor to say thank you. Right? I say that because I cut my neighbor's grass. I don't ask for any money for that, right? I like my yard to look a certain way, and if his yard looks bad, well, we both kind of just look bad. So let me help you out, right? But my point is, that improved our relationship greatly. I was doing something for him. He was saying thank you. Folks, when we acknowledge students, that's going to benefit the relationships we have with them. And as I said, that positive communication between student and teacher, between teachers and other teachers with, rewarding each other as staff members. And then, of course, that bridge between school and home and showing those positive attributes that happen on campus as well. For your school, you're going to see decreased office discipline referrals and less suspensions, which lead to a safer school environment. Raise your hand if you're a teacher on this call. Those of you that are teachers, what is something we always want, right? More instructional time. Not more time at school, but more instructional time usually, right? It's something we all want. And so this is going to increase that student exposure to your instruction because you're spending less time dealing with discipline in the classroom. Now, folks, across the nation, teachers are notorious for writing students up, right? Something happens, I want to write it up. Something happens, I need an office, someone from the office to deal with this. I want to just go over with you the cost of referral. So I just took a number. Lori, I don't have any data from your school per se. So I just used a number. When my school, before we purchased PBIS rewards, we were getting about 5 referrals a day at my school. Let's take that number and see what that does for our data here. Folks, with 5 ODRs and 180 days of school, I was a music teacher, so somebody check my math here. But is that not 900 ODRs a year? All right. Now, if you've ever dealt with a referral as a teacher, is it usually just 15 minutes that you spend dealing with the behavior and the writing of the referral, or does it take a little bit longer? I see you, Leslie. You're like, 15 minutes is a joke, right? I'm with you on that. I'm just giving you a roundabout figure here. So let's pretend 15 minutes with the teacher, 15 minutes with the student. Raise your hand if you're an admin on the call. Those of you that are admin, do you usually have a 15-minute meeting when you deal with a referral with parents and students? It's usually much longer. Am I right? I've spent a couple of hours with the parent on a referral before. So folks, this is just a small number, but let's pretend 45 minutes times 900 ODRs. Look how much time that is, folks. Now, in the early 90s, this would have worked fine because the primary job of an administrator in the early 90s was discipline. Today, the primary job of an administrator is more of an instructional coach. So discipline can't be their only focus. If you want an administrator that's transparent and visible on your campus, we've got to find a way to reduce these office discipline referrals so that administrators have an opportunity to engage with teachers and focus on that instructional area. So what I hope you can see looking at this data, folks, is that PBIS helps us improve behavior, which gives us more time to really focus on our instructional areas. Now, there are some crucial elements to PBIS that are necessary for implementation to be successful in your school. You want to make sure you have a PBIS team. am on that team, we should have representation across our campus, right? I don't want to just have, four kindergarten teachers on my PBIS team. Not saying they wouldn't do a great job, but we want buy-in from every level of education there, right? We want some from first grade, some from second grade. So try to do that. Oftentimes, elementary schools, I encourage to do grade level representation. When you get into middle schools and high schools, you might want to think more about departmental representation, right? Like a math person, a science person, just because meetings are handled a little bit differently in those middle school and high school areas. As far as data collection, you want to figure out a way to look at your data to make some informed decision. And oftentimes that's going to be your discipline data, right? Look and see what referrals are being written. For example, if you notice that in the month of February, you had a lot of students that were vaping at school. I'm just using as an example. Vaping is pretty big across the nation right now. If you notice that, doesn't that give us an idea of a social skill or something, an intervention or a tier one system that we can put in place to assist students with understanding why that would be a negative choice to make? So looking at data, it really helps us drive our PBIS incentives for the year. We also want to get buy-in from the staff and get some community involvement. Folks, the more people that you have that agree and support this initiative, the more people or the more likely you're going to see implementation be successful. I will tell you this right now. I could put all the policies and procedures in place in a handbook, if if my staff doesn't appreciate that, if they don't follow that, if they're not understanding that, that handbook doesn't serve a purpose, right? So we want to make sure, get that buy-in. Community is same way. There are a lot of agencies in your company, in your communities that might have things they can do for your school. They might be able to provide opportunities for incentives. The first year we used PBIS, I did not have a budget to purchase anything for my students. And the community provided us with lots of things that we could put in our stores. I had local movie theaters donating tickets. I mean, gift cards from local, ice cream shops and things of that nature. But again, just getting everyone involved in that process. Constantly evaluating and coming back to the PBIS team to report that is also important. With PBIS, one of the biggest things to consider and understand is that you need to have school-wide expectations. I can't have kindergarten following one idea and fifth grade following another, right? It needs to be something that we all agree on. And again, that's where that buy-in comes in handy. We also want to make sure there's a layer of behavioral instruction. Folks, we can't assume that every student knows how to behave, right? I'll tell you, I mean, I've got nieces and nephews. I've got a son of my own. My son is 18. My nieces and nephews are 9, right? When they come to my house, they're from New York, by the way. I live in North Carolina. When they come to my house, what we do in North Carolina, what we call respect in North Carolina, looks very different than respect in New York, right? My nieces and nephews, they don't really say yes, ma'am, and yes, sir, right? And that's okay. That's how they grew up, and that's fine. Well, in the South, that's really popular. We want to hear a yes, ma'am, or a yes, sir, or whatever the case might be. This is why it's important to teach those behaviors, folks. We also want to have a system of recognition, whether that's tickets or star students of the week or a combination of those, right? Also, consistent implementation. Raise your hand if you've got kids of your own on this call, if you've got your own children at home. Folks, tell me something. If I were to tell my son every day before he turns on the TV, he needs to do his homework. If that's the expectation in my house, if he comes in today and I'm like, you can watch TV today, and then tomorrow, you can watch TV tomorrow, is that going to work the next day? He's going to keep asking for that, isn't he? Because there's no consistency. We want to create that consistency. Professional development is important. Laurie understands that, hence why you're all here today. But again, understanding that we've got to also teach our staff what we're doing and communicate that as a school. We also want to have classroom systems in place. Folks, your classroom, one of the biggest reasons I wanted to be a teacher growing up, well, besides Saturday, Sunday, June, and July, one of the biggest reasons I wanted to be a teacher was I wanted to have autonomy. I wanted to feel like I was my own boss, right? And in your classroom, you really do kind of have that autonomy, don't you? You get to do what you want with your students, within reason, of course, but this is what those classroom systems are all about, making sure your classroom systems align with your school-wide expectations. And then, of course, discipline procedures. Now, you all don't use PBIS rewards, but I just want to give you a quick rundown of that. With PBIS rewards, it is school-wide. It allows any staff member to reward any student, anytime, any place, regardless of their grade level. It saves you time so you don't have to create a token economy or something along those lines. It's also going to help reduce office discipline referrals. In fairness, any PBIS implementation you have, whether that's with our company or something you're doing on your own, you're gonna see a reduction in your ODRs anyway. You also see more instructional time and better relationships, as I mentioned before. Folks, I can't stress this last part enough. Anything we do in our school, it should have a positive impact on our school culture and climate. If it's not, should we really be doing that in our school? Right? So remember that. And I'm saying I would tell you that if you were a customer, I would say the same thing. Hey, folks, if it's not working, it's not working. We got to go back to the drawing board. And folks, sometimes we have to do that in education. So now let's look at behavioral instruction, that school-wide matrix, and some classroom procedures. And this is where we're going to spend a lot of our time today, folks. Now, what I need for you all to do, can you all get out a piece of paper for me right now? It doesn't have, thank you. It doesn't have to be something you're not gonna share it with anyone, folks. We're gonna draw a picture today. I don't need you to be Picasso. I promise you, you should see my picture I drew with this. It's not great, folks. I can't even draw a stick man. So please don't worry about how pretty it is. But I'm gonna need you all to draw something for me. Can I get a thumbs up when you're ready? Perfect. All right, folks, I'm going to give you some instructions. I cannot go into more detail or ask or answer any questions you may have following my instruction. Okay? Instruction one. Please draw a boat on water. And remember, folks, we're going to take about 80 seconds with this drawing, so we don't need it to be, Picasso, or, you don't need to put ripples in your water. I love it. I love it. Just seems like you see mine is right here. All right, folks. Next, I need you to put a sky. Create a sky for me, please, to go with your boat. And last, create a background of any kind. So really quickly, I'm going to go over those again while some of you are working. I used to work in a Zoom room all the time with my students back in 2020. I think we all did. Wish I'd have had this kind of attention whenever I was doing that. No, honestly, folks. Again, one more time. Boat on water, a sky, and a background for your image or your picture there. I'm going to give everyone maybe 15 more seconds. Again, folks, it doesn't have to be perfect. And then when you're done, if you could just do me a favor and put your hands in front of you like this so I can see your hands. Perfect. It looks like most of us are ready to go. Let's rock and roll, folks. All right, everybody. So what I want you to do is we're going to give you some points based on your drawing today, okay? So I want you all to give yourself, and as we go through these points, if you could do me a favor, if you get a point, just hold it up on your fingers in front of you. Can you do that for me? Folks, I want to just say, don't be embarrassed by how many points you get. The first time I did this, I got 1 point. That was it. And that might be the case for several of us, and that's fine. Let's go with it. I want you to give yourself 1 point if you drew a sailboat. Give yourself another point if your boat had two sails. Give yourself another point if there were people in your boat. Give yourself another point if you drew a lighthouse in the background. Give yourself another point if you drew a sun with rays of sunshine. Folks, if you just drew a circle, it doesn't count. That could be the beach at night. I don't know, right? So it's got to have those rays of sunshine there. And then lastly, give yourself 5 points if you drew a house in the background. If I have someone on this call that's smart, I had someone on one of my calls recently and they were like, well, listen, I drew a lighthouse. Shouldn't that count? I was technically, I guess so. Wasn't the intent here, but if I can't say no to that, right? So I want you to just look around the room. Can you see that most people don't have more than 5 points? Why is that, folks? Could I have been more clear? Can someone unmute and tell me why
Yes.
do you what come on, I see somebody unmute. Yes, sir.
Where's the rubric?
Thank you. Right? We didn't go over any expectations, did we? I just assumed that you knew what I wanted, right? Wouldn't it have been better if I'd have said, all right, everyone, I want you to draw a boat on water and put people in your boat. It needs to be a sailboat with two sails. Folks, we forget that a lot as educators, right? We give students some instruction and we don't go into detail. Or I say to my students, everyone, I want you to go outside and play, but I don't define what play looks like, right? So it's important that we go over those expectations. So let's talk about shifting gears a bit. Folks, in education, as long as I could remember, at least while I was in school, traditional discipline was pretty punitive, wasn't it? It was very much, you did something wrong, you get in trouble, right? You do something right, oh well. Like there wasn't a lot we did for those things back then. I'm just being honest. I can't remember. I didn't get stickers and stars and, points and dollars. But with students these days, they need that extra extrinsic. They're extrinsically motivated. A lot of us are probably intrinsically motivated. A thank you, a pat on the back goes a long way. That doesn't always work with our students. And unfortunately, I don't see that improving in the near future. So we want to move away from using rules, which are very authoritative and negative in nature, and move to those expectations, which are more positively stated. So, folks, can we agree these are some general rules we see across campuses today? No talking, no social media, get to class on time. Again, folks, if I'm using expectations, I want this to be positive. None of that is positive that you see on the left there. We can convey the same behavior without being negative. Would anybody like to unmute and tell me a way I could say one of these rules that isn't negative?
Instead of saying no running, we can say walk, please.
There we go. Perfect. You can even be more specific and say walk on the right side or walk in the second block or whatever the situation might call for. But folks, we can say the same things in a more positive manner. This instills a bigger layer of respect for your students. You also, and folks, I will send you a copy of this recording, by the way, okay? So please know that. When you're creating your expectations, folks, make sure they're clear. Practice modeling those with your students. You might even want to create signals. Back when I was in school, every teacher on the planet, I felt like, just raised their hand, and that was the universal symbol for give me your attention, right? Well, these days we have other signals. We have people that do the claps. We have some people that do a snap thing. I've seen some teachers that hold up a flag of some color. There's all kinds of things you can do, but create some signals. That's going to save your voice, folks, so we don't have to yell. And nobody likes being yelled at, even students, folks. Also, be sure that you're going over your expectations with students. Don't just assume they remember them. Have any of you ever had a 4-day weekend with students and then they come back to school on Tuesday and it's like they never knew what school was all about? Have y'all had spring break yet? You'll know exactly what I'm talking about the first day coming back from spring break, right? It's just, and folks, let's be honest with ourselves. As teachers, is that first day back easy for us either? It wasn't for me, especially coming back from summer. That's why they give you a couple weeks at the beginning of the school year so you can get used to that again, right? It gives you some time to get some of that out of your system. When you set up school-wide expectations, you're encouraged to create a matrix. And you could use this for your school. You could also do one for your classroom if you would like. But again, on the left, we're going to have our expectations for our school. And across the top, we're going to establish some either a routine or a setting. So if I was doing this for the whole school, I might put hallway, bus, cafeteria, classroom, playground, etc., right? And then you would define those expectations down here. How am I respectful in the hallway? How am I respectful in the restroom, etc.? Everyone, I want you to do me a favor. Can you define this word for me, please? You can put that in the chat or unmute it and tell me. I'm gonna give you about 20 seconds. I don't need the Webster Dictionary definition of the word play, but what does the word play mean to you? Tell me in the chat or unmute. Whatever you're more comfortable with is fine with me. Having fun. Thank you. Corey, I think most people are going to say something similar to that. Activities that are mainly done for fun, doing something you find enjoyable, spending time with your friends. That's exactly me right there. Fun activity, which is not required. Okay. Unstructured time. So I'm getting from what I'm seeing in the chat, would you agree? Mostly what we're seeing is fun, right? Having fun. Okay, folks, I'm a former music teacher. If you say the word play to me, what do you think I think about? It's not playing outside. I think about, yep, how do you know I was a drummer? I was definitely a drummer, man. Just saying piano, but mainly church. Church did that for me. But I'll tell you, folks, when you say play to me, that's what it means. My son is 18. If I say the word play to him, what does he think about? Video games, right? All day long. If you say the word play, my brother was a musical theater major. You say play to him, he thinks about a theatrical production, right? My point is, folks, a word as simple as the word play that we think everyone knows the meaning of. Can it be different but from person to person? This is why we need to teach expectations, folks, because things do look different. Let me show you a school matrix. Now, you might have heard me earlier say when we create a matrix that we want to make sure we're specific. There are some words on this matrix that I don't find to be specific at all. They're ambiguous terms. Let's look at some of these. Folks, being prepared for Leslie and being prepared for me might be very different. I told you guys earlier I have a twin brother. My twin brother and I both became teachers. Okay, we both worked at the same school for a couple of years. He's not a teacher anymore. He went into corporate America so he can make money, I guess. But I'll tell you, folks, when my brother and I were both teachers, I remember one year I got pretty much his whole class of students in my class. And when they came in, folks, they expected me to be just like my twin brother. Well, we couldn't be more different, folks. I mean, I'm very structured, and he had a very chaotic classroom. Both approaches worked fine. We both had great test scores, but it was different. They expected something different. So you've got to be careful, folks, with these terms. Being prepared for my twin brother looks different than being prepared for me. We went to a conference together. He brought a notebook. I brought laptop, notebook, iPad, post-it notes, highlighters, all the things, right? Now, the sad story of that is that my brother remembers far more about that conference than I do, right? But I have 20 pages of notes that I can reflect back on, and he's got little bullet points from a couple of sessions, right? But again, everyone's a little bit different, folks. Be careful with these terms. Appropriate. What does appropriate mean? What does kind mean? What is a good choice? So these kinds of terms we have to be careful with, folks. I also want you to think about the viewpoint of most Americans when it comes to behavior. If I asked most Americans, if a child doesn't know how to read, would you agree they would tell me, well, we teach them how to read? And if they can't multiply or swim or drive, we teach them how to do those things. Well, why is it if I ask most Americans if a child doesn't know how to behave, what do we do? They don't usually tell me we teach them, do they? They think we punish. So I want to remind you, we have to teach behavior as well, folks. No matter what grade level you're in, seniors, freshmen, kindergartners, God bless kindergartners. They have got this. If you've ever been in a kindergarten classroom, folks, I'm just going to tell you, they don't just know how to line up. That doesn't just come naturally. Raising their hand, going to the bathroom, none of these things just come naturally. Someone has taught them those things. And thank a kindergarten teacher because it was probably them. Not always, but probably. So just a reminder, folks, about that viewpoint. Now let's look at the teaching expectation cycle here, folks. First, we define expectations. We simplify that as much as we can for our students. Then we need to model appropriate behaviors for our students. Everyone hold one finger in front of you, please. Let's move our finger up, move it down, move it to the left, move it to the right. Let's make a small circle with our finger. A little bit bigger, a little bit bigger. Now take your finger and place it right here on your chin. A lot of you touched your nose, and I don't understand why you would do that because I said touch your chin. Am I right that you did that because you were following what I did instead of listening? Hey, folks, guess what? Kids do that all the time. So if I tell my students in the hallway we're going to be on a level 0 voice, when I go in the hallway, I need to be on a level 0 voice too. I can't go in the hallway and be like, Miguel, you going to the game this weekend? Because what's going to happen? They're going to think that's okay for them to do that as well. So remember, they watch us, folks, and they're going to do the things we do, even if we tell them not to. Okay? You also want to practice in the natural setting if possible. Michael Jordan didn't become a good basketball player because he watched the sport on TV. If you don't believe me, check out his baseball career. Um, I'll just leave that there. I'm from North Carolina, folks. I can talk junk about Jordan, okay? Um, we can also supervise and acknowledge our students when they meet expectations and reteach when necessary. Folks, you're all teachers. A lot of you are teachers. If I teach a concept in August, do I got to review that again at some other point? I do, right? We have to do the same thing. And during those breaks or whenever there's a long weekend or a full moon outside, these are all good times that we might need to reteach expectations. And then, of course, sometimes we need to adjust the way we teach. Just like, raise your hand if you've ever created a lesson plan that you thought was going to be fabulous and it just wasn't. Right? I remember when Old Town Road came out, I made up all this stuff about Old Town Road. Folks, the kids did not enjoy it at all. And I just thought it was going to be the best thing since sliced bread. Folks, I spent weeks rewriting lyrics to that. And I've learned how to rap, okay? I did a lot for that. And it didn't matter. They didn't care. They didn't want it. We got to adjust what we do, folks. Remember, at the end of the day, we serve a public, but we serve a public of students. And kids are hard to please sometimes. At the end of the day, we've got to get them the instruction they need. I'll also remind you when we point out what someone does well, that improves their behavior almost 80% of the time, folks. Just by saying, hey, you did good. That's going to make it happen again. Now, does that work for everyone, folks? I'm going to keep it 100. It doesn't, right? Some students could care less if they please you. Let's be honest. But for most of our students, they want to please you. And if they don't want to please you, that's a good indication that you need to work on your relationship with that child. Because when we have good relationships with people, we care about what they think, we care about how they feel. You also might want to think about creating a lesson plan template to teach your expectations for teachers. I put one up here for virtual world just because someone asked me recently, well, could you do that in a virtual space? Sure. You have to go over expectations in a virtual world. When we started in 2020, back in March of 2020, I was a music teacher, folks. You think that was easy to do in a Zoom room? It wasn't, right? And Not to mention, how many of you guys had to beg your kids to put their cell phone mute? Or, if they had things going on in the background, like their brother running naked across we don't want to see all that, right? Turn your camera off, please, young man. So much had to happen that way. So, folks, a reminder, creating these templates really is a great way to teach your staff how to teach behavior. That doesn't come natural. And I'll tell you, I don't know about you guys and your college experience, but my college experience with classroom management was the bare minimum. I learned classroom management when I got in the classroom. Raise your hand if you feel the same way. 90% of teachers do, right, folks? You also might want to think about how you're going to get those expectations out to your students. When you're starting PBIS, I encourage some form of a pep rally, whether that's something you do as a whole school or in a classroom, but review your expectations. Talk about what you want to see in different locations and let them know how you're going to be rewarding points. As you go through the week, break those expectations down, right? I'm going to focus only on respect on Tuesday, only on responsibility on Wednesday, and I'm only going to reward respect on Tuesday. I'm only going to reward responsibility. This teaches students what we're looking for. It gives you that option to do that. And then on Friday, I'd review it again. Okay, maybe do an incentive for students on that Friday. Any student that earned 10 points this week can go to an ice cream party. If you don't have the money for an ice cream party, any student that got 10 points that week, you can take your cell phone out for the last 15 minutes of class, right? There's always something else you can do, folks, if the funding's not there. Remember that. You also want to remember behavior specific praise, folks. For example, if I give a student a point, I don't want to just give them a point because they were respectful. I want to say, thank you for being respectful by holding the door for me this morning. Okay? Thank you for being responsible by turning in your homework. Thank you for being safe by walking quietly in the hallway, right? These are all good examples of behavior specific praise you can use. Now, folks, I told you earlier, I want to make sure you understand, even though we think positivity, we know there's going to be some negative behaviors we see. Try using pre-corrections. Have you ever heard of those before, folks? A pre-correction would be, for example, before I take my kids in the hallway, I would say, boys and girls, remember when we go in the hallway, we're going to travel in the second block on the level zero voice, lock it or pocket. Lock it or pocket just means put your hands in your pocket or lock them in front of you or behind. I worked at an elementary school, folks, and if you don't say that, you get boogers all over the wall, stuff gets pulled down, lots of things like that. So again, use those pre-corrections. And it does, the reason for that, folks, why do we ask teach students to be quiet in the hallway? So it doesn't hurt instruction, right? Well, if you as a teacher go in the hallway and you're yelling at your whole class, isn't that just as distracting as quiet white noise? So again, that's why we use those pre-corrections. Do it before you leave your classroom. Also reward other students. Folks, when I went over this with my staff, I asked them to all download Cash App before we did it. And I was giving out $1 on Cash App if someone answered a question. Well, folks, usually when I ask my staff, does anyone have a question today? No one had questions because they were ready for the staff meeting to be over. Folks, I want you to know at the end of that staff meeting, everybody raised their hand. Everybody had a question. Why was that? They wanted the reward, didn't they? Rewards help, folks. Also, reteach those expectations. I said that before. I'm going to say it again. After a long weekend, anytime there's a change in your school schedule, a 2 hour delay, an assembly, an early release, any of those things, we might need to reteach expectations. A full moon, I said that earlier. Those are all good examples of times you want to reteach expectations. And of course, there are consequences for behavior. We shouldn't lead with those consequences. But is it okay to inform students of what those are? Absolutely. I'll ask a quick question here, folks. I want just talking about the teachable moment here. You don't have to raise your hand if you're not comfortable. Anybody ever had a speeding ticket? I've had a few, just to be honest. All right. Anybody ever had more than one? I'm going to keep my hand up because, as I said, I've had a few. Folks, let me tell you why I've had a few. Me getting a ticket, while it was a punishment and a consequence, it didn't teach me anything. That's a lie. It did teach me something. It taught me to look for cops when I'm speeding. That's what it taught me. And, folks, guess what it teaches students when we write them up? When I'm around Miss Leslie, she's going to write me up. So I'm not going to act up with her. I'm gonna act up with Mr. E because he don't write anybody up. You understand? Consequences don't always teach. We gotta actually teach students. This is why that was wrong. Here's something better we can do in place of that behavior. Now, as you reinforce expectations, folks, on your campuses, I want to go over a reinforcement schedule. When you go over that, maybe after Christmas break or winter break or spring break, your students going to come back and you're going to need to be able to review your expectations. I encourage you, focus on one expectation at a time that first week. The next week after, start doing some targeted reinforcement. Maybe you noticed during this week, students forgot to raise their hands. Look what I'm focusing on every day that week. I would only reward students for raising their hand. The next week, we noticed there was a lot of problems with kids getting to class on time. So that's going to be something I'm focusing on. Notice I'm still focusing on raising hands, right? Does everyone kind of see a good way to navigate those behaviors? Listen, folks, have anyone ever heard the expression, don't eat the whole elephant at one setting, eat it one bite at a time? Folks, that's never been more true than in education. Okay? So when we talk about student incentives, folks, I want to remind you, first of all, you've got to think about an economy. We don't want to give out too few points, but we don't want to give out too many points, right? For example, and folks, if I'm calling you out by name, please don't think I'm doing that to pick on anyone. You just happen to be on my screen, okay? But let's say I've got Dylan and I've got Marta, right? So we've got the two of you guys here. Dylan gives every student, I mean, Dylan pretty much gives points for the students for blinking in the classroom, right? He's giving out points for everything. Here you go, here you go. We're having to re-give it, restock his points all the time. Well, Marta you have to really work hard for a point in her classroom. All year long, Marta's giving out 500 points, but if you got a point, you were doing some great things. Well, this is why it's important, folks. Dylan's class is going to go to the school store and it's going to look like Walmart the day after Thanksgiving, okay? He's going to clear it out, okay? Marta's class is going to go in there and poor little Johnny in her class worked 5 months so he could buy a pencil. Right? So we want to be careful with our economy, okay? I want you to think about that and remember how you're going to structure those in your school. Now, I pulled this from PBIS rewards. You guys aren't using that, but I want to encourage you to create goals for your staff, right? As a staff member, you should give out about this many points a day, right? Base that on your expectations. If I had 4 expectations and 25 students, maybe 100 points a day, right? Maybe 50 points a day. Let's be honest, they're not going to all show all expectations every day. We're human, folks. As adults, can we say that every day we do everything correctly? I mean, if you can, good for you. I can't say that. All right. I can tell you I don't lie. I'm very authentic as a person. If you can't tell from my coaching style here, I'm just transparent. I don't believe in I'm not gonna finagle something. I don't even do that with my 18-year-old. He'd find out anyway. I also want to remind you when you reward students, be careful, folks. If you're going to have events, make sure your events are similar to the events around with other classrooms or within the school. For example, it shouldn't cost me 100 points to go to a dance today and cost me 1,000 points to go to a dance next week. Would that make sense to you? Think about that in terms of if this were my money, because this is essentially points to students, kind of is their form of currency, right? I will be providing you all with an ultimate list of incentives. Lori, you'll be happy to know this is not specific to our system. It will be on our website, but I want to provide this to you. You can filter this by grade. You can filter this by price. Teachers, I encourage you, find things that you can put in your treasure chest or your classroom store that doesn't cost a dime, just a little time, right? Like sitting in the teacher's chair or being first in line to lunch or being the class DJ for 5 minutes, whatever it might be. Be careful with that class DJ thing, folks. Just kids listen to things that you might not want them to listen to in school. I just want you to know. I was very shocked when a second grader played a song for me one time, and I was just like, okay. No, no, no. Wasn't any ugly words, but the context of the song was just not appropriate. I'll just say. Listen before you let them do that, maybe. But there's lots of things on this list that you can use. At an elementary level, folks, you can even do events in your school. These are some events that are really popular. Any kind of student teacher game, they love that. Folks, y'all ever see a kid at a restaurant or Walmart and they just can't believe you're there? It's like you're a celebrity, right? What are you doing here? Shopping, eating. The same thing you're doing here. They forget we're human, folks. I'm going to tell you, my son was in like fourth grade before he realized his teachers didn't live at school. I was like, why would you think that? I don't live at school. He was like, well, you're a cool teacher. So I was like, well, thank you. You really think I'm a cool teacher? He was like, I don't think you're a cool teacher, but the kids do. No, you're not cool. Don't think you're cool. So there's always that. And then, of course, you could do rewarding events. Let's say you're having a hard time getting students to come to PTO. Give them some points for coming. Beginning of the year. Do y'all have a hard time getting kids to turn in that beginning of the year paperwork? Give them some points for turning that in. I bet you it'll change. Extracurricular activities, tutoring. Here's some things you can do at the secondary level. Everyone see this duct tape a teacher or administrator to the wall? If you're going to do that, let me give you some advice. I did this every year at my school. Wear long sleeves. I didn't my first time. That felt like the worst wax session ever. Okay? Wear long sleeves. Also, make sure there's an adult with you when you do that. Someone in my campus did that without an adult present, and thankfully I walked by. I was like, did you think the kids were going to pull you down from the wall after they take you up there? That's no. They weren't going to do that. I wouldn't have either. But again, some things for you to consider. You can also do raffles or drawings. Again, reach out to your local movie theaters. Usually they'll offer you some incentives. They don't make their money off the movie ticket. It's the $20 popcorn and the $15 soda that they make their money on. And if you give them a free ticket, the parent's probably going to buy something like that. Also, mystery bags. You don't have to know what's in the bag. We did a mystery bag at my school every Friday. Sometimes it was great things. Like we put AirPods in there one time. We also forgot to bring something one day and we just printed some words of affirmation and threw that in a bag. Nobody was excited about getting the words of affirmation, folks. But hey, it was a good 21st century skill. This is why you don't buy mystery bags, boys and girls. You should know what you're buying before you buy it. So we did give the students something different the next week, folks, but I just wanted to give you a humorous example there. When you're setting prices, folks, think about your point distribution. What was that goal zone you set for your staff? Think about how many points they're giving out every day. Also, think about setting your prices on the high side. Folks, I don't know about y'all. Look at these gas prices. I haven't seen those since the 90s. Folks, set your prices high. Kids don't get mad if you lower the price. They're going to get upset if you raise the price. And I'm just going to remind you, wait over the next few months. Watch what we see happen to gas prices over the next few months as we drift into summer. I get upset about it every year. I don't understand why gas is $3 in January and $5 in August. This doesn't make sense to me. It's the same gas, putting it in the same car. So just think about that. You can also put items on sale, especially perishable items. We bought Takis from my classroom store every year. At the end of the year, if I still had Takis and nobody was buying them, hey, everybody, we're going to have a clearance today. It's 50% off. You want to get some Takis? What's going to happen to those Takis over the summer? They're going to expire, right? Or get stale. Nothing's worse than a stale Taki, folks. And then think about the quantity of items, right? If you got 100 stickers, well, we could probably sell those a lot cheaper than 10 sticky hands, right? All right, folks, we've reached the end of our training. Laurie, first I want to ask, did I cover the things you wanted me to cover today? I hope I did.
Yeah, this was great. I'm not sure if we're all going to open up a store, but I love the idea. I love the ideas and that you're sharing and can see it applicable to us. So we can talk more as a team when we do our teacher huddle, what that would look like. But thank you, Adam. That was incredible.
Absolutely. Well, Lori, I will tell you, I know you don't necessarily use PBIS rewards, and that's okay. I will send you a follow-up email. In that follow-up email, you're going to see my email address there. If you ever need any help throughout the school year, maybe you guys are trying to decide on an incentive system to use, and you just need someone to kind of bounce some ideas off, but feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help you in any way I can. Customer or not, I want you to know I got your back because you were a PD customer nonetheless. So I want you to know I'm happy to support you in any way I can. And that goes for any of you guys. If you guys need anything, Laurie's going to have my direct contact. Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help in any way I can as you are going through your implementation. I do want to lastly, just again, thank all of you for joining me on this call. Thank you for your engagement, your smiles. I really appreciated it. Thank you for turning your cameras on. It makes it a much better experience, at least from my side of things. So a big shout out to all of you for your engagement. Lori, I want to give a shout out to your staff. I do these trainings a lot with folks, and I had fun today. I can't believe it's been an hour already. So I hope you had as much fun as I did. And again, folks, thank you for your time. If you would please, there's a QR code on your screen. If you could scan that and give me some feedback about the session, I would greatly appreciate that from you. I can also put that in the chat as a link in case you're not favorable to using your phone. I know some of my staff hated that, so I will put that in the chat for you as well in case you're someone that doesn't like that. And I'll also include an email address there where you can reach me, folks, if you ever have questions about implementation in your classroom. I wish you the best of luck, folks. Have a great spring break coming up. I'm jealous I don't get one anymore. So I'm jealous. Enjoy your spring break. Have a great rest of your year and good luck with your implementation, everybody. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Hi, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Goodbye.
You're